Hello, and welcome to Wired for Wellbeing, a podcast devoted to viewing our lives through a nervous system perspective to better understand what's actually going on and how to shift it. Because we are all inherently wired for well-being, we all hold the keys to connection, happiness, and ease. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein, and I've been a clinical psychologist for the past 4 decades. And during that time, I've specialized in the treatment of trauma and dissociation, as well as chronic illness and chronic pain. In this podcast, we'll listen to real questions and challenges from people just like you and offer guidance, perspective, and a way through. I'm joined by my good friend and producer, Steve Lessard. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Jeffrey. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Today, we'll look at why connection can still feel hard even after deep healing. When we faced our past and found peace within, it can be confusing to feel uneasy in friendship or closeness. We'll look at how protective patterns in the nervous system can linger, how the body may still brace for danger even when it's safe. And we'll also explore what it means to move from surviving to belonging, from self-protection to connection and trust. Steve, what calls do you have for us this week?
Jeffrey, we have one written question today that I'm going to read. And I chose only one question because I think this question touches into a few different areas that are really important to unpack. And I wanted to give you some space to do that today.
Great.
I'm an experienced meditator of over 20 years. I'm also a trauma survivor of severe childhood trauma. I've worked through and healed the majority of my trauma, but find that making and maintaining healthy friendships, ones that are nourishing for me as well, is still so difficult. Can you help me understand from a nervous system perspective what may be going on and how I might be able to work on changing this dynamic? Thank you.
That's a big question. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into this one. And my heart resonates with a couple different pieces of this, right? So you're right. This is amply rich for us to explore on a couple of really foundational viewpoints. So one viewpoint, let's talk a little bit about, for our listeners who have either experimented with meditation or are meditators, or that's a part of their practice, and whether that's yoga or meditation practice or prayer, people who have employed some kind of contemplative practices or tools, both for spiritual purposes. And I mean, when I was a child, there was a limitation of psychiatric options for a child who was really anxious, somewhat obsessive compulsive. Drugs and therapy were basically the opportunities of the day. So I know that when I was very young, I had some deep spiritual longings. But when I actually picked up a book on yoga, I was 11, and I was doing it because I was so overwhelmed with anxiety. My life was so controlled by it that I was miserable. And at that age, I really didn't tell anyone else about it. None of my friends would have understood. It always felt like it was keeping me very separate, being that wrapped up in my own mind and worries and fears. And I also know that for the first many years that I was practicing different forms of meditation, I had great difficulty. The books and the teachers would make it seem very easy. You just have to settle down, put your attention on your breath, and stay there. And every time it wanders, you bring it back. But I found that my nervous system was so jumpy that sitting was very difficult. Keeping my mind on anything was very difficult. I really went through a period in my life where sitting down for more than 5 or 10 minutes felt challenging for me. I had so much restless energy. So one of the things that I know I leaned into this kind of practice for was to learn how to help self-regulate, how to feel a little bit more comfortable in my own skin, to not be driven by fear and worry or anger so much at the time. But I ended up really encountering so many struggles with adapting to meditation because in the cultures that meditation originated in, right? I don't know if they were being offered to people who were as anxious, at least as anxious as I was as a kid, and as anxious as a lot of people are now. And so often in my experience, people try some kind of practice, get discouraged about how active or jumpy their mind is, and then give it up, feeling like they're a failure and they can never learn anything from this. And so I think that there are particular ways that people can learn how to lean into meditation practices, especially if you learn how to work with the nervous system first, to be able to guide it to a place where you have an easier time shifting into paying attention in a more contemplative way, in a way that's less absorbed in the continual flow of thoughts and worries and beliefs and pressures and problems. So this individual has told us that she's had a long history of this and has been practicing for 20 years. That's a long time. Steve, I believe you've done some mindfulness practice too, right?
Yeah, I have quite a bit.
How have you found it's impacted in your life, and or were there any particular frustrations in you learning it?
I think as a younger version of Steve, I had expectations on my practice that it should look and be a certain way. And that in order to do it right, I needed to sit on my cushion for 30 minutes or an hour a day and have a form, the form of my practice look a certain way. But the transition that I believe I've made in my practice is that for me, it's much more organic, and it actually involves less sitting on a meditation cushion, which was a source of shame for me, feeling like I should be a good meditator, I should do this. And those moments of awareness, I'm able to, having practiced for many years, find in other areas. But that shame of I should be able to do this, I should be able to quiet my mind, I should sit for 30 minutes a day or an hour a day, as I was really trying to quote unquote discipline myself into a meditator, that always left me feeling like I was playing a part that wasn't me.
Yeah, but I guess even more painfully so is that in this attempt to grow, to heal, to evolve, right? That even that action was then met with a repercussion of shame. I'm doing this, but it's not good enough. Not getting my butt to the cushion every day, or it was only 20 minutes a day instead of 25 or 30. And so it becomes this game that we're losing at and failing at, that we're not doing a good enough piece at, or everyone else's mind, I'm sure, can stay on their breath, but mine can't, or everyone else is in much more equanimity than I ever am. I remember when I was on retreats, and I'd be just waiting for that bell to ring so we could move again. And my head was screaming in those moments. And I'd look around the room, and everybody else looked so calm, so still, so peaceful. Now I know they were probably screaming on their own right inside at the time. But the idea was that there's this automatic sense of seeing everyone else as being able to get there, and we're the outliers. We're the ones that aren't quite doing it. And you bring up shame, which is such a human response. It's a way of keeping us in check. We could actually do a bunch of long conversations just on shame itself. But I think that that's ultimately one of the things that holds so many of us back, is this unrelenting sense of unworthiness, not enoughness, that everyone else can do it better than me. Everyone else is an adult, or I'm just acting, or I'm an imposter. These feelings are so widespread throughout our culture that it's again almost not seen as anything abnormal, because so many people feel this deep down inside. And are too ashamed to talk about it because we're not supposed to share our brokenness, or what we're afraid of is our brokenness. So it gets me to swing back towards our questioner, right? So the story that I make up from this week's anonymous questioner is that she's spent a good at least 20 years practicing meditation, which is watching one's own mind, being aware of the tosses and turns we go through, the knots we get tied up in when we're going through our day. Part of a meditator is like beginning to watch that on the cushion or off the cushion. She's also devoted time to transformation, towards therapy and other processes that probably have helped her work through the vast majority of the burden of trauma, the fear of trauma. What she also brings up, though, is not unusual. As we work through our healing, especially with long-term trauma, and I think it moves more powerfully these days when we're actually able to pay attention to the nervous system changing and evolving, because that's really what helps us have a cognitive kind of flexibility and ability to try new things, as if we're not so trapped by or hijacked by our nervous system being chronically dysregulated from the trauma. But so more and more of our life gets less dysregulating. We handle more and more stressors with relative ease. Less of our daily fears or shames are awakened. Less of our life feels determined by our past or by trying to keep rigid hold of ourselves. But as we reach the further shores of our journey of healing, we'll often come across the issues that are the hardest to open up. One of my therapists years ago had said, we're getting to your last pistachios. And I said, what's that? And he goes, the pistachios you keep putting back in the bag, the ones that are too hard to open. When you first open the bag, you leave until you're really hungry and everything else you've eaten. And so you then work at opening those tougher nuts to crack. So these remaining problems, these remaining places we still get knotted in by our nervous system, are some of those last pistachios. They're the ones that, for some reason, still hang around. And so for our caller, that place seems to be in holding her back or limiting her in how comfortable she can feel making, establishing, and nourishing relationships. So she wants relationships, but she's having difficulty either finding them or feeling brave enough to make them, or perhaps feel like they don't end up producing the depth of connection that she hungers for. So part of what I would say is congratulations for all the work that you've done. It's decades. It's a long time. And also, I want to commend you for the honesty in seeing where it feels like you're still being held back. That also takes a certain amount of awareness that's actually essential if you want to be able to experience some liberation from this, some freedom from being bound and dragged around by your past. But one of the biggest pieces of our source of shame is the loss of attachment. We feel shame as a response to prevent us or attempt to prevent us from losing attachment. The feeling is, for example, if you find out something that I consider really deeply shameful about me, Steve, that you'll just stop being my friend. You'll stop wanting to talk to me. And because of that, it feels too dangerous to share with you. I have to hold that inside of me. So if that is something I'm hiding deep inside, I can be very comfortable about being a caretaker, being there for other people, answering their needs, being a good friend, someone to depend on, all those things. But I may not, because of my shame, I may not feel that comfortable actually putting me in the relationship. And so I may have friendships where I get to know these other people, but they don't get to know me. And maybe they have a different understanding of attachment. So you may be repeating a kind of non-mutual attachment that so many trauma survivors do. Because if we've grown up in relationships where a partner or parent has been narcissistic, it's going to train us to emphasize other people's needs ahead of ours, and to be reluctant about the risk of, if I put my needs out there, what if someone rejects me for them or shames me for them? So there's something usually tied up in shame and in feeling that you'll be not enough, or that you'll be disappointed like perhaps you were in the past, that probably gets you to err on the side of being very cautious about friends, doubting yourself about making overtures, or doubting perhaps why someone would truly like you now. So I'd invite you to get curious about those things in particular, to see how they might be weighing on you or playing in your mind at this point in time.
The analogy of the pistachio is one I love. And it's easy for me in my pistachio eating history. My method, when I do get down to those lasts, is I've got to find other tools or other ways to get into some of those that have that little slit that sometimes you can crack into. And there's others that just aren't worth it. And I move on from them. That I love thinking of it in that way and using that as a reality that things are going to get harder the deeper we go on our healing journey. And maybe I'll phrase that differently. Things might not always get harder, but things may get harder the deeper we go in our healing journey, and or the deeper we go in our meditation experience. And we may set up these expectations that they're the easy pistachios, but they're really the hard ones. I love that.
Yeah, and it's so easy to keep forgetting that everything we encounter is part of the way, right? Like, there's no bad nervous system state. It's not, oh, I'm a bad person for being angry. No, it's a nervous system state. And you're probably not a happy person if you're always being driven around by your anger or your resentment. But it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that your nervous system is always feeling irritable and angry. And that's kind of living in hell, so to speak. Just like, I guess, if you're always living in fear or terror or doubt or shame, it's getting stuck in these totally human and natural states. It's the stuckness. It's the living in there and then taking these states as us, right? So let's go back to the caller for a minute. The idea here, too, is that it would be very easy for someone in her situation to believe that there's something wrong with her as to why people don't like her, why she doesn't have friends. Now, this is almost always the outcome of shame. Is we notice what's missing or what feels unpleasant or what we're unhappy about. And shame also has the great ability to direct the fault back to us. I'm the reason that I'm lonely. I'm the reason that people don't like me. I'm the reason that I don't have friends. So there's a feeling of lack, and then there's this immediate feeling potentially of feeling crushed because, of course, I'm lacking. It's my fault. Of course, I don't have friends. No one's going to like me. And our nervous system can just keep circling the drain. We call that circling the despair drain, the drain of despair. And we can stay there. And as long as we're in there, we're suffering terribly. We're very unhappy, but we're also not feeling any access to any energy that would begin to help us change our loneliness, that would help us reach out to someone else, right? And so the very thing that we engage in, this shaming and despairing circle, also pulls us further away from what we actually want, which is connection that feels good.
Jeffrey, I'm wondering if we can go a little bit deeper into trust. And the idea that I'm going to try to articulate is something that I've called in my life easy friends. They're friends that maybe I don't see for months at a time. And when I do, we're able to to lock right back into the relationship of where it was. There's few expectations or limited expectations. It's not needy. It's easy and open and maybe safe. Maybe there's some safety there. What's going on here in that experience, and how does it relate to what our caller might be looking for?
That's a great point. So what I make up with these good friends is that there's actually a body experience of ease. That the operant word we'd use from a nervous system perspective is your nervous system feels safe. This person feels like a clear friend. You don't have to worry about them attacking you, or they don't have a really touchy temper so they could blow up in a minute. So you don't have to kind of be a little vigilant or on guard. You can relax. And there's a consistent history with them being a good person in your life, being consistently available or caring, consistently mutually interested in you as you are in them. So there's this base point that we really do trust. We both feel safe with the other person, but we also have over time, the safety becomes trust. That on so many years or so many times, each time we connect, we're right back to where we are. And there is something where our nervous systems, or you and your friends' nervous systems, kind of reconnect in a rhythm. And it feels like, in essence, even if it's been 5 months or 3 years, like almost no time has gone. You're right back in that connection again. Now that's beautiful. If we had very few experiences or no experiences like that, then our nervous system will have a harder time predicting safety. So the more disruptive relationships I had, or the more relationships that ended up with betrayal, which is a whole other piece of trauma, this betrayal trauma, when people close to us broke boundaries or harmed us, or other people knew we were harmed and turned away, it rocks the foundations of the ability to both feel safe and to trust. And so people who've had interpersonal betrayal trauma will have a much more challenging time trusting. They're going to want to trust because they're going to want to feel connected at some level, but they're also going to feel vulnerable and not fully safe. It will take time to sort of retrain the nervous system that in the right relationships, you can feel safe and connected and have this sense of over time trust that who you've been has been that same good person in my life. And, you have different nervous system states like we all do, but you basically always care about me. You basically are always there for me, right? And again, if we've had trauma that has really shaken that, it's hard for us to have as much of a body sense of trust and safety, even leaning into making that happen. Because I could open myself to you and then you could turn out to hate me or dislike me or abandon me. And so, I'll be destroyed then. So maybe I'll play it cool.
The other thing that occurs to me is that in my experience, I would choose to have a few really deep friends than many potentially less deep friends. And other individuals I know have a larger friend network, which has had its own questioning shame story in my life. But I've learned to accept that my style, and maybe you could help describe from a nervous system perspective if there is a difference in these styles, or if there is something to maybe be aware of ourselves as this person writing in is looking for making and maintaining healthy friendships. Is there some wisdom in this few versus many approach?
I really think that's also a nervous system choice, right? That each of us is different. So some people's nervous system thrive, get energy and excitement from being at a loud party that has a lot of stimulation and tons of different people to connect with for moments at a time. The variety and the stimulation and the energy are just wonderful for them. And there's other people who that would be so overwhelming to their nervous system, would feel exhausting or overwhelming, or to say the least, unpleasant. So the idea is finding the rhythms finding the activities that work with the rhythm of your nervous system. So, for example, like I like sometimes being at parties, but it's rare. It's a lot of energy and it's a lot of people, it's a lot of noise. So I like it at times. I'm fine doing that, but I wouldn't want to do that like multiple times a month, or multiple times a year. A few times a year is good enough, right? Again, it's finding what works for you. Sometimes when we're trying to find friends, we're trying to do anything that we can do to fit in, but we're sort of abandoning ourselves in that process. And that's what's dangerous. Well, I'll try here and I'll try here and I'll go there. And there is a beauty to that, of being willing to really reach out and engage in some activity to cause connection. But if we're doing it from a sense of lack, from less than, we're already starting off with one foot feeling off balance. If we can lean into this by, instead of like trying to find someone who will like me, trying to find someone who I'll like, who I'll be comfortable with, who I'll want to spend time with. So many people who've been wounded let themselves be chosen by other people. I'll choose you as a friend. Okay, fine. Like, they don't have to make that risk, right? About making friends. It's easier to have other people make overtures to them and they can say yes. But it's a little bit like, then you kind of accept whatever the current is presenting to you, instead of like, does this person light up your nervous system? Do you feel safe? Do you feel that this person is interested in you? What's the level of connection, right?
I find that interesting, that idea of being chosen as a friend versus what the person who's written in is asking about, of making friends. I don't know if you have any other advice on making friends from a healthy nervous system perspective.
I know this from so many folks I've worked with and from myself, that especially when I was more desperate for friends when I was younger, I would just figure out what the other person needed and try to be that. A little bit like a chameleon to a certain extent, and it was done not as a thought of manipulation. It was just done that I felt whoever I wasn't worth it or worth enough. And so I had to be something more or different to be worthy of their connection or their attachment. So shame gets us to hide. So here's some things to be aware of. In conversations, we could offer this to our anonymous caller and to anyone who's having a similar struggle. Do you find that your default, if you get anxious with someone new, is to keep asking questions, which keeps getting them to talk so you don't have to self-reveal? That was one of my favorites. Do you find that if someone does ask about you, you find a way to answer it and turn it back towards them in the quickest time you possibly can, because you don't want to take too much attention up, right? These are little things to be aware of, because it means that it's almost like attention in a relationship feels like a hot potato and you got to toss it back to them. And that's not being in the relationship. That's trying to play by the rules of what you imagine a good relationship is, where you're overly conscious about how much time you're taking and you shouldn't take any. If you notice that's happening, that's not going to be working towards supporting you and feeling comfortable and safe and authentically you, right? So if someone has been raised with a narcissistic parent or caretaker, chances are you have experienced narcissistic wounding, which means that there's a technique for folks who are more at the end of the extreme called an echoist. So narcissists can only be in love with their own reflection, and an echoist is basically the reflection. Whatever narcissist wants, the reflect. You are beautiful. Who is the most beautiful in the land? You are. Who is the most wonderful? You are. Children of narcissists kind of learn how to have to reflect the narcissist and their moods and their values and annihilate their own reflection. And if we want healthy connection, we have to find a way to actually own our own being, our own reflection, our own presence, instead of trying to be a function of serving somebody else and hiding behind that. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's wonderful to be of service as well and to have a mutual and reciprocal relationship. Those are really important qualities of a healthy relationship. But if we're really, really good at caretaking of others, we're probably also really good at making us small, very small, take up very little space in a relationship. Steve, have you ever found you've done any of that?
Absolutely, I do. I've seen that. I've noticed the ways that I would deflect people's positive comments and their ways to offer something kind to me, and I would deflect that back because in my story of origin, that was not something we took, and that don't be big, be small, and I would deflect their gratitude or their comment or compliment to me, and I would see them shrink a little bit. I would see how that would deflate the conversation, and learning to stop doing that, I think, was a big point in my own like self-confidence journey, self-compassion and self-confidence journey. What's going on with self-confidence and self-compassion in this type of experience?
Well, from my view, I see so many things as revolving around shame, that nervous system state. It's such a powerful piece. And shame often combines with a sense of either anxiety, we're going to get caught, or disowned or shunned, or a sense of anger at ourselves. What's wrong with me? Why do I do this? Everyone else is a master meditator and I'm a master distractor. So this core of shame makes it hard for us to receive compliments because there's a part of us that doesn't believe we're worth it, doesn't believe it's noble to receive a compliment, believes that might be selfish or too self-indulgent. And so we push it, oh, no, it's fine, it's fine. And you're right. Someone tries to pay you a compliment, and when you whisk it off, right, there's a little bit of emptiness in the other person. Like they were actually trying to say, no, this dinner was delicious. Oh, it's nothing. No, it really was. Right? So there's a way that our nervous system fends off compliments because it doesn't feel safe for a nervous system that has a tuning towards shame. And so it's important to see that even if you're not conscious of feeling shame itself, that shame can be limiting how much you feel you can access in a friendship, how much you could have a friend be open to you as you are to them, having something be truly mutual and equal, instead of, what was it, George Orwell's 1984, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. You know, it's the idea that we're all equal, but they're more special than me. And this is something that I think stops so many people from finding themselves within comfortable, safe connections. And that's something that all of us need at some level, is the benefit of the nourishment of having other humans we can connect with in some meaningful and safe way.
Jeffrey, maybe you can take us back to the beginning of our time here today and maybe recap some of the themes and the takeaways.
Sure. So, you know, first of all, I want to thank this caller because, well, this writer, this email writer. First of all, it's great if people can't reach us for any reason on the line. You either can send that voicemail or you can just write us an email. But we're looking at sort of the whole scope of the nervous system here. We began talking about how for some of the people who listen, they've tried relaxation or meditation and struggle with it or felt frustrated or like they failed. And it's not that they failed, it's just that their nervous system state made it extremely difficult for them to learn how to enter a state of meditative awareness or mindfulness. But once you learn how to shift your nervous system, it becomes eminently more possible to then access this capacity to be aware of awareness, which often we're too distracted to do. And so it in and of itself is a great, great path for learning deep self-regulation. And that even with folks who've been on the path for years of growth and healing and recovery, that as we grow, we can still find some areas that have been a little resistant to us changing. And again, it's not a failure. It's just that it wasn't the time before now to deal with it. It's just like when we get to the last pistachios, we get to them because it's time to get to them. When we get to an issue like this, we get to it because we're finally ready. And we weren't ready before this. That's why we didn't get to it. And so now it invites a deeper level of reflection and curiosity about what's not allowing me to feel as safe as I'd like in making friendships. What might I be able to do to increase my sense of capacity or safety? How might I want to change how I reach out or what I say? Are there ways that I'm holding myself back, keeping my light under a bushel, not really sharing who I am, that I might want to do a little differently and see how much I can actually be myself in relationship? So once we notice that something's not exactly how we'd like, or we're still struggling with it, by getting curious and leaning in, we offer ourselves the potential to really change the situation. Most of the time, we get discouraged and lean out. Ugh, I hate seeing that about me. I'll never be better. It works for everyone else, but not me. And we just get discouraged and we give up and we go to despair. So part of this is remembering that it's our nervous system that's doing this, not some part of us that's destined to always want to sabotage us, or some part of us that's being stupid or wrong or reluctant. It's always because some part of us is feeling unsafe. And as long as we recognize that, we can change the conditions to help safety be primary.
Well, Jeffrey, I want to give you some space to let individuals know how to send their question in. And I bet there's also a few people out there who are a little on the fence about doing that, about, is my question good? Should I send it in? Should I not? Would you say to them, and where can anybody send a question to ask you?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, friend. First of all the questions we get are great. And I really appreciate the thought. If you have any question, I would love for you to send them in. There isn't a question that's too small or too off track here. We'll try to answer it the best we can. And we'll be answering things through this view of the nervous system and a way of understanding our struggles, our desires, our longings, and our issues, and how to resolve them from this perspective. If you'd like to send a question, please call 866-357-5156, or you can send an audio recording. And if you can't do that, you can just send an email to hello@drjeffreyrutstein.com. I'm also really excited to let you know that this month, registration opens for my flagship program that is produced with Sounds True. It's a 9-month intensive blended learning program that takes participants on a deep dive of both learning about the nervous system, but being immersed in a body-based learning experience that helps you take this learning from concepts and directly into the marrow of your bones. To find out more, you can go to drjeffreyrutstein.com/links, LINKS. And if you press that, that will take you to a page that has a link, among others, for the Healing Trauma program there. And finally, if you enjoyed your time today, please feel free to subscribe and share with a friend. And if you're up for it, Would love a 5-star review. Hey, Steve, thanks so much for being with me today.
Jeffrey, thank you as always.
Pleasure. And thank you for joining us. Hope to see you next time. Bye for now.